One way of looking at memory is to divide it up into 3 stages: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding is about whether the eyewitness actually acquired any memory of the incident in the first place. Storage is about whether they can keep that memory intact over time. And retrieval is about whether they can report that memory at a future date. If someone can't remember something, it could be that they never had that information in the first place. That is, the information never even became a memory. That's a failure of encoding. It could be that the information did make it into memory, but they've since forgotten that memory. It's no longer there to be retrieved, so that's a failure of storage. Or a memory could still be present in their brains, but they can't access it. They can't retrieve it, so that's a failure of retrieval. As we've discussed, memory is a creative, constructive process. It's not like filming what happened and replaying the film footage at a later date. We've already seen narrative conventions and time slice errors and how they can affect memory accuracy. However, there are many other types of errors that can occur at every stage of the memory process. Let's start at the encoding stage. Well, the first thing to understand is that what we experience, what we think we perceive about the real world around us, is largely fake to begin with. Presuming that there is an objective reality out there, what we perceive is actually only a subjective reconstruction of that reality created by our brains. Let's have a look at a demonstration. I'm going to show you 2 pictures from the crime scene that will be shown in an alternating sequence. Can you spot the differences between the 2 pictures? If you're one of the people who didn't spot the difference, here's the 2 images again, but this time with the grey screen that was inserted between the images removed. Most people wouldn't immediately have spotted that very large and obvious change where we'd removed an entire car from the picture. So your impression of viewing those images was that you were looking at the whole of the picture in all its detail. It doesn't feel like you're only seeing a part of the picture. In reality, however, that's exactly what's happening. Your brain was focusing in on particular narrow elements of the picture and essentially guessing what was in the bits you weren't attending to and filling them in for you to give the impression of a complete picture. Hence, many people fail to notice immediately when we remove, for example, an entire car from the image. What this sort of effect tells us is that our experience of the world shouldn't always be trusted. What we see around us is no more than an elaborate reconstruction that our brain makes, interpreting information from our senses. What we're seeing is not the objective reality of what is out there. There's a correspondence between what we experience and the objective reality, but it's far from perfect. Our brain constructs an impression of the outside world that's generally convincing, but it does sometimes fall down. And this is what is happening when we view visual illusions. In fact, 2 people can experience the same event quite differently. Have a look at this classic image by Fisher in 1968. Some of you will see an old woman, but some of you will see a young woman, and others will see the old man. So, not everyone interpreted that image in the same way. Different people saw different things. Your experience of the world around you is coloured by expectation and open to influence. So, if you witness a crime, it's entirely possible that you might misperceive some elements of the events in the first place, even before you have to remember them. The circumstances of the crime, like whether the offender has a weapon, can also influence how the witness remembers the crime. The weapon focus effect suggests that when a weapon is involved, the witness's memory of the criminal's physical appearance is impaired, because the witness's attention is drawn to the weapon and away from the criminal's face. This is something that has been demonstrated in laboratory studies where researchers have been trying to find out why this happens. One explanation for this effect is that witnesses are so scared by their weapon that they fixate on the source of the threat to the exclusion of more peripheral cues. Another explanation is that the weapon is an unusual or surprising item, and so it draws the witness's attention away from other things in the scene. Jonathan Fawcett of Dalhousie University and his colleagues, they did a study combining all previous research in what's called a meta-analysis, which suggested that there's some empirical support for both of these explanations. The weapon focus effect can be harder to reproduce in real-world settings, leading to some people to suggest that it's only something that happens under simulated conditions. However, recent research indicates that the problem with the real-world work is that it's compromised by other issues. For example, a suspect with a weapon is more likely to be bolder in terms of getting closer to a witness or staying at the crime scene for longer, where the negative effect of the weapon on the eyewitness's memory of the suspect's face is cancelled out by the fact that they had a better opportunity to see the suspect. When Jonathan Fawcett examined this in their meta-analysis, they did find a weapon focus effect that was unaffected by whether the event was simulated or real. So what does the weapon focus effect mean for eyewitness testimony? Well, we need to be aware of the potential for a witness's memory accuracy to be worse in situations where a weapon is present, though the size of this effect depends on a number of interacting factors that need to be taken into account, such as length of time that passes before the memory is retrieved, the duration of the original event, and the level of threat. Another implication is that it may be possible to train people likely to be exposed to situations involving weapons, such as police officers, to avoid this bias. So that's one example of a bias that affects the encoding stage of eyewitness memory. However, every step of the memory process is vulnerable to distortion. In the next presentation, we'll talk about some factors that can affect the storage and retrieval stages.